My father chose his new wife over me at every turn for 15 years, but when his will was read, even she couldn't believe what he'd done. I still remember the exact moment I realized my father didn't love me anymore. I was 14 years old, standing in the kitchen of our family home, watching him pack his belongings into cardboard boxes. The sound of tape being ripped from the dispenser echoed through the silent house. My mother sat at the dining table, her face blank, emotionless, like she'd cried herself dry days ago. The divorce papers were already signed. Dad was leaving, and he was leaving for her. Jennifer. That's the woman who destroyed my family. She was his secretary at the law firm where he worked as a partner. 28 years old. Blonde, beautiful, ambitious. Everything my mother wasn't, according to him. My mom was a kindergarten teacher, soft-spoken, kind, devoted to our family. She smelled like crayons and patience. But apparently, that wasn't enough. Emma, sweetie, you'll understand when you're older, Dad said to me that day, not even looking me in the eye. His voice was hollow, rehearsed. Sometimes people grow apart. Your mother and I, we just want different things now. Different things. As if 17 years of marriage and a daughter meant nothing. As if we were items on a shopping list he'd decided he didn't need anymore. I watched him fold his favorite navy sweater, the one I'd given him for Father's Day 2 years before, and place it carefully in a box. He was taking pieces of our life and walking away. The divorce was brutal. Dad fought my mother over everything. The house, the savings, even my college fund that my grandparents had started when I was born. He had expensive lawyers in sharp suits who spoke in legal jargon. My mother had a court-appointed attorney who seemed half asleep during proceedings, shuffling papers and barely objecting. In the end, Mom got the house, but it was mortgaged to the breaking point. Dad kept most of his assets, his retirement accounts, his partnership in the firm. And he married Jennifer 3 months after the divorce was finalized. I thought things couldn't get worse. I was wrong. At first, Dad still made an effort. He'd pick me up every other weekend, take me to dinner at restaurants with white tablecloths and waiters who called him sir. He'd ask about school, my friends, my grades. But Jennifer was always there, sitting beside him, her manicured hand touching his arm, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. She'd smile at me with her perfect white teeth and say things like, "Your dad talks about you all the time, Emma. He's so proud." But I could see it in her eyes. The calculation, the impatience. She tolerated me because she had to. I was the remnant of his old life, the reminder that he'd had a whole existence before her. And she wanted to erase that. She wanted him entirely to herself. Within 6 months, the visits became less frequent. Dad would cancel at the last minute. "Work. Emergency," he'd say over the phone, his voice distracted. Or, "Jennifer isn't feeling well." Once, he forgot my 15th birthday entirely. I waited by the window all day, watching for his car. He never came. When I called him the next day, my voice small and hurt, he apologized profusely, promised to make it up to me. He sent flowers to the house 3 days later. He never did make it up to me. By the time I turned 16, I barely saw him at all. Maybe once every few months, if that. And when I did, Jennifer dominated every conversation. She'd talk about their new house in the suburbs with its marble countertops and heated floors, their trips to Europe where they'd sipped wine in Tuscany and toured museums in Paris, the charity galas they attended where they rubbed elbows with senators and CEOs. My father would sit there, nodding, smiling at her like she was the sun itself, like she'd invented light. I remember one particular dinner, shortly after my 16th birthday, when I tried to tell Dad about a short story I'd written that won a regional competition. The prize was $200 and publication in a literary journal. I was so proud. I'd worked on that story for months, pouring my heart into every sentence. He smiled and said, "That's great, honey. Really great." But his eyes were already drifting to Jennifer. Then she cut in, talking about some article she'd read in the New Yorker about emerging writers and the death of traditional publishing. Suddenly, the conversation was about her opinions on modern literature, her thoughts on the digital age, her predictions for the future of storytelling. Dad hung on her every word, asking questions, debating points with her. I sat there, pushing grilled salmon around my plate, feeling invisible. The restaurant was too cold. My skin prickled with goosebumps. Nobody noticed. The final straw came during my senior year of high school. I'd been accepted to 3 universities, including my dream school, Columbia. The thick envelope had arrived in March, and I'd screamed so loud my mother came running, thinking something was wrong. We'd cried together, happy tears, holding each other in our small kitchen. But the tuition was expensive, and even with scholarships and financial aid, I'd need help. My mom had already said she'd contribute what she could, but on a teacher's salary, it wouldn't be enough. I called Dad, nervous but hopeful. He was wealthy now, even more successful than before. The firm had made him a senior partner. Surely he'd help his only daughter go to college. Surely this was important enough. Dad, I got into Columbia, I said, trying to keep the excitement in my voice, trying not to sound too needy. That's wonderful, Emma. Congratulations. His voice sounded distracted, like he was reading emails while we talked. I could hear keyboard clicks in the background. I was hoping. I know it's expensive, but with your help, I could actually go. Mom's going to help as much as she can, but Emma, I'd love to help, but things are tight right now. Jennifer and I just bought a vacation home in the Hamptons, and we're renovating the main house. New kitchen, new bathrooms, the whole thing. Maybe you could look into student loans? A lot of kids do that. Student loans. He wanted me to go into debt while he installed heated floors in his second bathroom. I felt something break inside me that day. Not my heart that had broken years ago. Piece by piece. Missed visit by missed visit. This was different. This was the final severing of whatever thread still connected me to him. The last bit of hope that maybe, just maybe, he still cared. Sure, Dad. I'll figure it out, I said, my voice flat. I knew you would. You're a smart girl. You've always been resourceful. Resourceful. The word tasted bitter in my mouth. I hung up and cried for hours, curled up on my bed, my mother sitting beside me, stroking my hair like she used to when I was little and had nightmares. I went to Columbia anyway. I worked 3 jobs, campus library, weekend catering gigs, and tutoring spoiled rich kids whose parents paid me $40 an hour. I took out loans that made my stomach hurt when I calculated the interest. I applied for every grant and scholarship I could find, writing essay after essay about overcoming adversity, about pursuing dreams despite obstacles. My mom helped as much as she could, picking up extra tutoring gigs in the evenings, sometimes not getting home until 9 or 10 at night. I graduated with honors 4 years later, exhausted but proud. Dad didn't come to my graduation. He sent a card with a $100 bill inside. Jennifer had signed it too, her looping handwriting spelling out, "Congrats," with a little smiley face. After college, I moved to Boston for a job at a publishing house. I stopped calling Dad. He didn't seem to notice. Months turned into years. I got promotions, built a career, fell in love with a wonderful man named Marcus who worked in software development and made me laugh until my stomach hurt. We got engaged on a beach in Maine, the sunset painting the sky orange and pink. I didn't invite my father to the wedding. I didn't even tell him about it. My mother told me he called her once, asking why he hadn't received an invitation. She told him to ask me himself. He never did. I hadn't spoken to my father in almost 8 years when I got the call. It was a Tuesday morning in October, and I was at my desk, editing a manuscript about a woman who'd survived a shipwreck. My coffee had gone cold. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Emma Calloway? A woman's voice. Professional. Somber. Yes. This is she. This is Patricia Mendez. I'm your father's attorney. I'm calling to inform you that your father, Richard Calloway, passed away 3 days ago. The funeral is tomorrow at 2 p.m. at St. Michael's Church. I'm also calling to request your presence at the reading of his will, scheduled for Friday at 10 a.m. in my office. The room spun. My father was dead. Dead. And I hadn't even known he was sick. Nobody had called me. Nobody had thought to tell me he was dying. What? What happened? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Heart attack. Very sudden. He was playing golf. I'm sorry for your loss, Miss Calloway. I went to the funeral, though I'm still not sure why. Marcus came with me, holding my hand as we sat in the back of the church. The pews smelled like old wood and dust. Jennifer sat in the front row, draped in black designer clothes, a veil covering her face, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She looked older than I remembered, lines around her mouth, her blonde hair now streaked with silver. She'd aged. We all had. People came up to her, offering condolences, hugging her, telling her how sorry they were. She played the grieving widow perfectly, her voice breaking at just the right moments, her hand clutching tissues like a lifeline. I wondered if she even remembered I existed. The service was impersonal. A priest who barely knew my father read generic passages about eternal rest and God's mercy. A colleague from the firm gave a eulogy about Dad's dedication to the law, his sharp mind, his mentorship. Nothing about him as a father, nothing about me. After the service, as people filed out into the gray October afternoon, Jennifer finally approached me. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but I couldn't tell if it was from genuine tears or just good acting. Emma, she said softly, her voice trembling. Thank you for coming. Your father, he loved you, you know. He talked about you often. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her why. If he loved me so much, he'd abandon me. Why he'd chosen her over his own daughter. Again and again, for 15 years. Why he'd missed every important moment of my life. But I just nodded, my jaw tight. I'll see you at the will reading, she said, and walked away, her heels clicking on the stone pathway. The next day, Friday morning, Marcus and I sat in the attorney's office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The autumn sun streamed in, too bright, too cheerful for the occasion. Jennifer arrived 10 minutes late, wearing a cream-colored Chanel suit, her face composed, makeup perfect. She sat across from us, barely glancing in my direction. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Patricia Mendez, my father's attorney, sat at the head of the polished conference table. She was in her 50s, with short gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She opened a leather folder and cleared her throat. Thank you both for coming. I'll get right to it. Richard Calloway's estate is valued at approximately $12 million, including properties, investments, and liquid assets. 12 million. The number hung in the air. I felt sick. He had all that money and wouldn't help me with college tuition. He had all that money and let my mother struggle to keep our house. Patricia continued, her voice steady. Richard left detailed instructions in his will, which was updated 6 months ago. To his wife, Jennifer Calloway, he leaves the vacation home in the Hamptons, currently valued at $1.2 million, and a one-time payment of $200,000. Jennifer's face went pale. The color drained from her cheeks. What? That's it? What about the main house? What about his investments? His retirement accounts? I'm his wife. We were married for 15 years. Patricia looked at her calmly, her expression neutral. I'm getting to that. The main residence in Brookline, all investment accounts, retirement funds, life insurance policy, and the remaining liquid assets, totaling approximately $10.6 million, are left entirely to his daughter, Emma Calloway. The room went silent. I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered in my chest. Jennifer's mouth fell open, her eyes wide with shock and fury. That's impossible, Jennifer said, her voice rising, cracking. There must be a mistake. I'm his wife. I was with him for 15 years. I took care of him. I loved him. I gave up my career for him. There's no mistake, Patricia said firmly. Additionally, there's a letter Richard instructed me to read aloud. It's addressed to both of you. She pulled out a sealed envelope, broke the wax seal, and began to read in a steady voice. My father's words. His last words to us. Jennifer, Emma, if you're hearing this, I'm gone, and it's time I told the truth. I've been a coward my entire life, especially these last 15 years, and I need you both to know things I never had the courage to say while I was alive. Jennifer, I'm leaving you the Hamptons house and some money because you gave me 15 years of your life, and I don't believe in leaving anyone destitute. You were loyal in your way. You stood by me. But you need to understand something, and I'm sorry to tell you this way. I never loved you. Not really. Not the way you deserved to be loved. I was flattered by your attention when we first met, excited by the affair, seduced by the idea of starting over with someone young and beautiful who saw me as successful and powerful instead of just another middle-aged man having a midlife crisis. But love? No. I loved my first wife, Catherine. I loved the family I destroyed, and I've spent 15 years regretting it, drowning that regret in expensive vacations and new houses and charity galas where I could pretend I was someone important. You were never my wife in the truest sense. You were a distraction from my guilt. Every expensive vacation we took, every new house we bought, every material thing I showered you with, it was all an attempt to fill the void I created when I left my family. But it never worked. The void only grew. I'm sorry I wasted your time. I'm sorry I let you believe in something that was never real. You deserve to find someone who actually loves you. I hope you do. Emma, my darling daughter, my greatest achievement and my biggest failure. I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve your forgiveness. I abandoned you when you needed me most. I chose my own selfish desires over being your father. I let you struggle through college alone while I bought a second home. I missed your graduation, your wedding, years of your life that I can never get back. I told myself I'd reach out, that I'd fix things, that there was still time, but I was a coward. I was ashamed. And then too much time passed, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap I'd created. The chasm was too wide. The truth is, I never stopped thinking about you. Not for a single day. I followed your career from a distance. I know about your success at the publishing house, your promotions, your marriage to Marcus. I looked at your social media accounts even though you'd blocked me. I created fake accounts just to see photos of your life. I'm proud of you, even though I have no right to be. I watched you become an incredible woman despite my failures as a father. You succeeded without me, and that's both my greatest pride and my deepest shame. This money, Emma, is the only way I know to try to make amends. It won't fix what I broke. It won't erase the years I wasn't there. It won't bring me to your graduation or your wedding. It won't pay back the student loans you struggled with. But it's yours. It was always meant to be yours. Everything I built, everything I earned, it should have been for you all along. I only wish I'd been brave enough to tell you while I was still alive that you were the greatest thing I ever did in my life, and losing you was my biggest regret. I had a heart attack 6 months ago. A warning. The doctors told me to slow down, reduce stress, put my affairs in order. That's when I changed the will. I wanted to write to you then, but I didn't know what to say. How do you apologize for 15 years of abandonment? How do you tell your daughter you're sorry when sorry feels like such an inadequate word? So I wrote this instead, and I hope, somehow, it's enough. Emma, I hope someday you can think of me without hating me. That's all I can ask. I love you. I always did. I was just too broken, too selfish, too cowardly to show it. Please use this money to build the life you deserve. Be happy. Be everything I wasn't. And maybe, if you have children someday, be the parent I should have been. That would be my legacy. Not the money. You, Dad. When Patricia finished reading, the office was silent, except for the sound of Jennifer's sharp breathing. My face was wet. I hadn't realized I was crying. Marcus squeezed my hand. Jennifer stood up abruptly, her chair scraping violently against the floor. "This is insane," she hissed, her voice venomous. 15 years! 15 years I gave him! I could have married someone else. I could have had children. I'm 43 years old now. I wasted my youth on him. And this is what I get? A house and a paltry $200,000 while she gets millions? She turned to me, her eyes blazing with rage and hurt. You didn't even visit him. You didn't call. You didn't send a card on his birthday or Father's Day. You abandoned him just like he abandoned you. You cut him out of your life completely, and now you're rewarded for it? You don't deserve this money. You don't deserve any of it. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the villain who'd stolen my father. I saw a woman who'd spent 15 years with a man who never truly loved her. A woman who'd given her youth, her prime years, to someone who was using her to run from his own guilt. A woman who'd just learned that her entire marriage was a lie. You're right, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the tears. I didn't visit him. I didn't call. Because he made it clear, again and again, year after year, that I wasn't a priority, that you were more important, that his new life was more important than his daughter. And I had to accept that and move on. I had to build a life without him because he chose to build one without me. Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. Real ones this time, not the performance from the funeral. But for what it's worth, I continued, I don't think you deserved what he did to you either. He used you. He used you to avoid facing what he'd done to his family. He used you to feel young again, to feel desired, to run away from his guilt. And that wasn't fair to you. You deserved someone who actually loved you. You deserved honesty. You deserved 15 years with someone who saw you as more than just a distraction. She stared at me for a long moment, her face crumpling, then grabbed her Prada purse and stormed out, the door slamming so hard the windows rattled. Patricia looked at me sympathetically. I know this is overwhelming, Emma. Take all the time you need to process everything. We'll handle all the legal details in the coming weeks. There's no rush. Marcus drove me home through the city streets. I sat in the passenger seat, staring out the window at the fall leaves swirling in the wind, my father's letter playing over and over in my mind like a song I couldn't stop hearing. He was sorry. He'd always loved me. He'd been proud of me. He'd followed my life from the shadows, but he'd never told me. Not when it mattered. Not when I was a heartbroken 14-year-old watching him pack boxes. Not when I was struggling through Colombia, eating ramen noodles for dinner and working until midnight. Not when I got engaged, or married, or any of the moments when a simple phone call could have changed everything. That night, I sat in my study, looking at the framed photo of my mother and me at my college graduation. She'd been there, beaming with pride in her best dress, even though she'd worked double shifts for months to help me afford textbooks. She'd never given up on me. She'd never chosen anyone over me. The money would change my life. I knew that. I could pay off my student loans that still haunted me. Buy a house with a yard instead of renting our cramped apartment. Start a family without financial stress. Donate to causes I cared about. Help my mother retire comfortably after decades of teaching. Set up scholarships for kids like me who needed help. But it didn't heal the wound. It didn't bring back the years. It didn't give me back the father who should have been there. Money couldn't buy that. Nothing could. A week later, I met with Jennifer one last time at a coffee shop in Cambridge. She'd called, her voice small and hesitant, asking to talk. I almost said no. Marcus thought I should say no, but something made me agree. She looked different, tired, smaller somehow, without the expensive clothes and perfect makeup armor. She wore jeans and a simple sweater. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. She looked like a regular person, not the villain I'd built up in my head for 15 years. I'm not here to fight about the will, she said immediately, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. I know I can't contest it. My lawyer already told me it's airtight. I needed to tell you something. I waited, sipping my latte. Your father talked about you all the time, especially near the end, these last few years. He'd tell me stories about when you were little, things you'd said when you were 5 or 6, games you'd played together, how you'd make him play tea party with your stuffed animals. He kept a folder on his computer with articles you'd published, pictures he'd found on your social media before you blocked him. He'd check your LinkedIn every week to see if you'd gotten a promotion. He was obsessed with your life, even though he wasn't part of it. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. I asked him once, maybe 2 years ago, why he didn't just call you, Jennifer continued, her voice breaking. He said he was afraid that you'd hang up on him, or worse, that you'd be polite but distant, cold, and he wouldn't be able to handle that. He said it was easier to love you from far away than to face how much he'd hurt you, that facing your anger or your indifference would destroy him, and he was too much of a coward to risk it. That's exactly what it was, I said, my voice hard. Cowardice. I know, but it's the truth. She paused, looking down at her coffee. I was angry when I heard the will. I felt betrayed. I felt like my entire marriage had been a waste. But the truth is, I knew. Deep down, I always knew he didn't really love me. I saw how he looked at old photos of your mother. I heard him crying in his study late at night when he thought I was asleep. I knew I was a replacement, a poor substitute for the life he'd destroyed. I just didn't want to admit I'd wasted 15 years on someone who was in love with his own guilt and regret. We sat in silence for a moment, the coffee shop buzzing with conversation around us. I'm sorry, I said finally. For all of it. For my part in judging you before I knew you. For the role I played in his guilt, even if it wasn't my fault. For everything that happened. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. Me too. I'm sorry I was part of breaking your family apart. I was young and stupid and thought I was in love. I didn't think about you. I should have. We never spoke again after that. 6 months later, I stood in the nursery of our new home, painting the walls a soft yellow. The smell of fresh paint filled the room. Marcus was assembling the crib, cursing softly at the incomprehensible Swedish instructions, holding a tiny Allen wrench like it had personally offended him. I was 6 months pregnant. A girl. We were going to name her Claire, after my mother, who'd cried when we told her. The money had changed things. We'd paid off all our debt, my student loans, Marcus's car, our credit cards. We'd bought this house in a good neighborhood with good schools. We'd set up college funds so Claire would never struggle like I did. My mother was retiring early at 62, finally able to rest after decades of working herself to the bone, teaching other people's children while raising her own alone. But the real change was internal. I'd spent so many years carrying anger and hurt like stones in my pockets, letting my father's abandonment define a part of who I was. His letter hadn't erased that. The money hadn't fixed it. But it had given me something I didn't expect: closure, permission to let go. He'd been broken, selfish, cowardly, a man who'd made terrible choices and lived with regret for 15 years. But in his own messed up way, at the very end, he'd tried. Not enough to overcome his own demons, not enough to pick up the phone while he was alive, but enough to try to make amends the only way he knew how. I'd never forgive him completely. Some wounds don't fully heal. They scar over, but they're always there, tender to the touch. But I could let go of the bitterness. I could choose not to let his failures poison my future or my daughter's future. As I painted, careful strokes of sunny yellow, I thought about the daughter I'd soon hold in my arms. I thought about the kind of mother I wanted to be: present, supportive, willing to admit mistakes and ask for forgiveness. Someone who showed up even when it was hard, even when it was uncomfortable. I wouldn't be perfect, No parent is. But I'd be there. Every day. Every moment that mattered. That was the difference. That evening, I called my mother from the nursery. Mom, I just wanted to tell you thank you for everything you did for me, for never giving up, even when things were hard, for being there when Dad wasn't, for showing me what real love looks like, for teaching me that love isn't about words or money, it's about showing up. She was quiet for a moment, and I could hear her crying softly on the other end of the line. Oh, sweetheart, you never have to thank me for that. Being your mother is the greatest joy of my life. You and Claire are my whole world. We talked for over an hour about the baby, about her retirement plans, about painting the nursery, about everything and nothing. When I hung up, Marcus wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his hands on my growing belly. I could feel Claire moving, little flutters against my ribs. You okay? He asked, kissing my temple. Yeah, I said, looking around the yellow nursery at the life we were building. I really am. My father had loved his new wife more than me for 15 years. He'd chosen her again and again, in big ways and small. He'd missed birthdays and graduations. He'd refused to help when I needed him. He'd built a whole new life that didn't include me. But in the end, he'd made a different choice. It came too late. It didn't fix what he'd broken. It didn't erase the years of absence and hurt. But it was something. An acknowledgement. An apology written in numbers and legal documents because he didn't have the courage to say it with words while he was alive. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to finally let him go and move forward with the family I was building. One based on presence, not guilt. On love shown through actions, not regrets written in a will. The nursery walls gleamed soft yellow in the fading spring sunlight. Marcus kissed my shoulder. Our daughter kicked gently, a little foot pressing against my hand. This was my life now, not defined by what my father took away, but by what I'd built in spite of it. Not haunted by his absence, but enriched by those who'd stayed. And that, I realized, holding my husband's hand in the room where our daughter would sleep, was the greatest inheritance of all.